Hey friends, I'm really glad you're here today. I want to start by naming something gently because I have a feeling some of you will recognize it right away, even if you haven't quite known how to describe it. There are seasons where life isn't actually falling apart, but it also isn't light. Nothing is breaking. Nothing is demanding immediate rescue. You're showing up, doing what needs to be done, keeping things moving, and from the outside, it probably looks like you're handling it just fine. And yet, there's a weight that lingers beneath the surface. Not a chaotic weight, not crisis weight, just quiet heaviness that comes from holding a lot for a long time, especially when much of what you're holding doesn't even belong to you. Sometimes that weight comes from standing close to someone else's pain. Sometimes it comes from being the steady one, the person others lean on when life gets uncertain, the one who doesn't panic, the one who keeps things grounded when everything else feels shaky. If that's been your role for a long time, you may not even register how much you're carrying. It just feels normal. This is how you've learned to live. So today's episode isn't about breaking down or walking away. It's not about slowing life to a halt. It's about learning how to let God hold what you were never meant to carry alone. Even as life continues to move forward, responsibilities remain, and faith is practiced right in the middle of it all. If you're listening and thinking, I'm okay, but I'm also tired, you're exactly where this conversation begins. Pull up a chair, grab a coffee, and let's sit with this together. There are moments in life when you become acutely aware that something important is unfolding. And no matter how much you care or how deeply you're invested, it simply isn't yours to control. I'm walking alongside people that I love very deeply right now who have been in a long, heavy valley. Not a short season, not the kind with quick resolution or clean edges. This has been years of waiting, years of uncertainty, years of holding on while life continues to ask things of them anyway. And they're approaching a moment where everything could change, where one outcome could reshape their lives in ways none of us can fully predict yet. I won't share the details because it's not my story to tell, but I can say this. Holding space right now feels heavier than it did before, not because the valley is new, but because the unknown is narrowing. Clarity is coming, and somehow that makes the waiting more weighty, not less. I find myself being careful in ways that are hard to explain unless you've lived this kind of proximity to someone else's pain. Careful not to absorb the fear that isn't mine. Careful not to spiral into outcomes that haven't happened yet. Careful to stay present without becoming consumed by the possibilities. It's a delicate balance. Listening, steadying, offering space to vent and process, and gently pointing back to faith without rushing, fixing, or minimizing what they're carrying. And then I step back into my own life. I show up to church commitments. I prepare content for this podcast. I lead a year-long Bible study. I teach my kids. I keep the rhythms going, and none of it feels optional, and honestly, none of it feels wrong. This is the life that I've been given, and I care deeply about all of it. But when I slow down enough to notice, I realize that I'm carrying their uncertainty alongside my own responsibilities. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly in the background, like a browser tab that never quite closes. What surprises me is that I don't feel sad about it. I feel peaceful, grounded, faith-filled, and at the same time, I feel the weight of it. That's the place I want to stay with you today. Not to fix or to make it go away, but to notice what it asks of me and what it might be inviting me to release. Somewhere along the way, being steady stopped feeling like a choice and started feeling like the fact of who I am. I don't remember deciding that I would be the calm one, the reliable one, the person who figures things out and keeps going even when things are hard. It's just the role that emerged, shaped by necessity, reinforced by experience, and eventually internalized as normal. When life shakes, I don't freeze, I don't panic. I orient myself quickly, assess what needs to be done, and move forward. And because that response has served me well over time, I rarely stop to question what it costs. What I've noticed, though, is that steadiness has a way of hiding its own weight. From the outside, it looks like competence, faithfulness, maturity, strength. People see consistency, the showing up, the follow through, the way commitments are honored, even when circumstances aren't ideal. And none of that is false. These things are real, and they matter deeply to me. I don't resent them. I don't want to become someone who walks away the moment things feel heavy. But internally, there's another layer that doesn't get named as often. There's the quiet mental load of tracking everything at once. Who needs support? What's coming next? What can be prepared ahead of time so nothing drops if my energy dips for a day or two? There's the low-level vigilance that keeps running in the background, even during moments that are otherwise peaceful. And there's the familiar refrain that rises without drama or self-pity. I'll make it work. I always do. That sentence doesn't feel heroic when it shows up. It feels practical, neutral, almost comforting. It reassures me that things will keep moving, that life won't stall because of uncertainty or fatigue. And most days, it's true. I do make it work. I keep teaching, creating, leading, loving, and learning, often simultaneously. I adjust when something has to take a back seat. I accommodate what I can. I plan ahead so my brain can rest when it needs to. What's interesting is how rarely I pause to acknowledge that this way of living, while functional and even fruitful, is also exhausting. Not the kind of exhausting that demands immediate attention, more like the kind that accumulates quietly, the kind you only notice when you finally sit still long enough to feel it in your body. A heaviness in your chest, a fog that settles behind your eyes, a sense that you're carrying more stories than you have space to process, even though you're not overwhelmed by any one of them. I've lived long enough now to recognize a pattern. My life has been filled with stories I can't fix. Some of them are mine, some of them belong to people I love, and some of them are past chapters that can't be rewritten, only integrated. Over time, I've learned to carry those stories without bitterness, without needing someone to blame, and without constantly revisiting what could have been different. I genuinely believe that the hard things I've lived through have shaped me into someone more capable of walking with others through their own healing. That belief brings me peace. It gives meaning to what I've carried, and still, belief doesn't erase weight. So here I am, peaceful, faithful, committed, and tired in a way that doesn't feel alarming, but it does feel honest. I'm not unraveling. I'm not in crisis. I'm simply aware that there are limits to what a person can hold, even when that person is capable, prepared, and deeply grounded in faith. And that awareness is beginning to ask something of me, not urgently, not loudly, but persistently. I've been sitting with this realization lately that capacity isn't just how much we can do, it's about how much we're holding internally while we're doing it. For a long time, I assumed that if I was still functioning and still showing up, still able to meet my commitments, then I must be fine. And in many ways, that's true. I'm not disconnected from faith. I'm not numb. I'm not operating out of fear or resentment. There's a real sense of peace underneath the movement of my life, even when things feel complex or uncertain. But peace doesn't mean weightless. What I'm learning is that it's possible to be grounded and still be carrying more than you were meant to carry alone. It's possible to be faithful without being endlessly self-sufficient. And it's possible to trust God deeply while still holding on to things out of habit, responsibility, or a quiet belief that if you don't keep everything steady, something important might fall apart. I don't think we talk enough about how easy it is for competence to slide into control, not because we're trying to dominate outcomes, but because we've learned that being prepared keeps us safe. When you've lived through enough instability, enough unanswered questions, enough seasons where you had to hold yourself together, preparedness becomes second nature. You learn how to anticipate needs, manage uncertainty, and absorb pressure without making noise about it. That skill is not a flaw. It's wisdom that was earned the hard way. And yet, over time, it can quietly turn into a posture where God is trusted in theory, but not always invited to the weight-bearing parts of our lives. We pray, we believe, we show up, but we still brace ourselves as if everything ultimately rests on our shoulders. What's been gently shifting for me is the realization that letting God hold what I can't isn't about stepping away from responsibility. It's about refusing to be the sole container for the things that I was never meant to manage alone. It's about acknowledging that some outcomes, some timelines, some stories are simply beyond my capacity, no matter how capable or faithful I am. And strangely, that acknowledgement doesn't make me feel less steady. It makes me feel more honest. There's a quiet relief that comes with naming the truth. I can care deeply without carrying everything. I can show up without bracing for impact. I can walk alongside others without absorbing their future into my nervous system. I can prepare wisely without rehearsing every possible outcome in my mind. This isn't a dramatic surrender moment. There's no emotional release or spiritual crescendo. It's more like a subtle loosening, a decision made again and again to unclench my grip just enough to breathe, to recognize when I've crossed the line from faithful presence into silent overfunctioning. What I'm realizing is that God doesn't need me to be less committed or less reliable. He's not asking me to drop the things that matter to me. He's inviting me to stop carrying the weight of things that were never mine to resolve in the first place. And that invitation feels kind, not corrective. It feels like permission not to stop caring, but to stop bracing, not to disengage, but to trust that faith doesn't require constant internal vigilance, not to abandon the roles that I have been given, but to inhabit them with a little more openness, a little less tension, and a little more grace towards my own limits. I'm still learning what that looks like in practice. I don't have a formula. Some days I catch myself tightening my grip again without realizing it. Other days I notice the weight feels lighter. Not because these circumstances have changed, but because I'm not trying to hold everything together by myself. And maybe that's what this season is really teaching me, that trust isn't proven by how much we carry, but by how willing we are to admit when something is too heavy to hold alone. If you're listening to this and finding yourself quietly nodding along, I want you to know that you're not alone in this space, even if your life looks different from mine on the surface. Some of you are the steady one that others rely on. You may not wear that label intentionally, but it's the role that you've been given over time. When something falls apart, people call you. When decisions need to be made, you're the one who stays calm enough to think clearly. You don't make things worse. You don't add drama. You help hold the center when everything else feels uncertain. And because you do it well, no one questions whether you're okay. They assume that you are, and most days you are. You're grounded, you're faithful, you're not unraveling. But steadiness doesn't mean weightless. And it doesn't mean that you aren't carrying more than you let on. Some of you are holding unresolved outcomes that belong to people that you love. You're walking alongside stories that don't have clean endings yet. Situations where timelines are unclear, decisions are out of your control, and the future feels like a narrowing hallway rather than an open road. You care deeply. You're committed to staying present without being consumed, but the waiting itself takes energy. It asks something of your nervous system, your prayers, your emotional bandwidth, even when you aren't consciously thinking about it. You may not talk about this part much because it feels hard to explain. It's not your crisis, but it still affects you. It's not your pain, but you still feel it. And you've learned how to hold that tension quietly, offering support without absorbing every possible outcome, even though that balance gets harder the closer clarity draws. Others of you are capable people who have learned how to make your life work almost automatically. You juggle responsibilities, you prepare ahead, you plan so nothing drops when your energy dips. You've learned how to automate what you can, adjust when necessary, and keep moving forward even when things feel full. You don't necessarily feel overwhelmed. You just feel occupied in a way that rarely lets your mind fully rest. What connects all of these experiences isn't stress or sadness or burnout in the dramatic sense. It's the accumulation of quiet responsibility, the kind that builds when you care deeply, show up consistently, and choose faithfulness again and again without needing recognition for it. And if that's you, you may have noticed something subtle happening over time. You've gotten very good at carrying things, not just tasks or commitments, but emotional weight, other people's uncertainty, long stories without resolution, the pressure to stay grounded so others don't fall apart, the internal sense that if you don't keep everything moving, something important might stall or slip. None of that makes you unhealthy. None of it means you're doing something wrong. In many ways, it speaks to your character, your capacity, and your deep sense of responsibility. But it also means you're human, and humans never were meant to be the sole containers for everything that they love. What I want you to hear today is not an instruction to stop caring, to stop showing up, or to stop being who you are. This isn't about disengaging or stepping back from meaningful work. It's about recognizing that being steady doesn't require being self-contained, and being faithful doesn't require being the only one holding the weight. You're allowed to acknowledge when something feels heavy, even if it feels peaceful at the same time. You're allowed to name limits without calling them failure. You're allowed to admit that carrying things gracefully still costs something, even when you don't resent the life that you've been given. If you've been living in that space, faithful, capable, steady, and quietly full, I hope you can feel how gently this conversation is holding you. There's nothing that you need to fix or change right now. There's just an invitation to notice what you're carrying and consider whether all of it actually belongs in your hands. There's a part of this conversation that doesn't lend itself to clean language or quick conclusions, and that's where I want to stay for a little while, because this is often where we're tempted to rush past our own experience. When you begin to notice how much you're carrying, there can be an immediate urge to do something with that awareness, to lighten the load quickly, to reorganize life, to draw new boundaries overnight, to find the right words that will somehow make everything feel more manageable. But awareness doesn't always ask for action right away. Sometimes it asks for presence. What I'm learning is that letting God hold what I can't doesn't happen in a single moment of clarity. It happens slowly, unevenly, often without fanfare. It looks less like release and more like loosening, like a gradual softening of the grip I didn't realize that I was keeping so tightly. There's another layer to this that I've also been noticing, and I want to name it carefully because it feels tender and important. As I've been learning to loosen my grip, to notice when I'm bracing, when I'm carrying more than I should, I've also become aware of something else happening alongside that process. I can see patterns now that I couldn't see when I was in the middle of everything. Moments lining up, conversations arriving at just the right time, stories intersecting with one another in ways I didn't plan and couldn't have orchestrated if I tried. This podcast is part of that story. I didn't rush into it. I didn't force the timing. I didn't start it because everything felt clear or settled or even figured out. I started it because there came a moment when it felt quietly obvious, not loud, not dramatic, just an invitation that kept returning until I finally listened. And now, looking back, I can see how things that were planned months ago are meeting moments that are unfolding right now, almost as if they were meant to find each other. That awareness brings a deep sense of gratitude, not the kind that feels triumphant, but the kind that feels humbling, the kind that says, I didn't make this happen, I just paid attention. At the same time, it carries a sense of responsibility. not a pressure to grow faster, not an anxiety to reach numbers, or not an anxiety about reach or numbers, not fear of getting it wrong, but a quiet responsibility to be faithful with what's been entrusted, even while it's still small, even while it's still unfolding, and even while only a few people may be listening. That responsibility doesn't feel heavy in the same way that other weight does. It feels grounded and anchoring, like stewardship rather than striving, like being asked to show up honestly and consistently without needing to control what comes next. What I'm learning is that leaning in when you're called doesn't mean bracing yourself for impact. It doesn't mean gripping the outcome or proving that the invitation was worth accepting. It means staying available to the work, to the people, and to the process, while still allowing God to hold the timing, the growth, and the unfolding story. And that too requires loosening the urge to make something happen, loosening the need to measure effectiveness too soon, loosening the quiet fear of wasting a moment or missing an opportunity. Because faithfulness, I'm discovering, doesn't come from squeezing everything you're given as tightly as possible. It comes from holding it with open hands, caring deeply, showing up fully, and trusting what's meant to grow will grow in its own time. That's where gratitude and responsibility meet for me right now, not as tension to resolve, but as a posture to inhabit, a way of being present without being possessive, a way of leaning in without caring what isn't mine to hold. There are days when I feel that loosening happening. I notice myself breathing more deeply. I catch myself choosing not to mentally rehearse every possible outcome. I sense a little more space between what's happening around me and what's happening inside of me. Nothing has changed externally, but internally, something has shifted just enough to make the weight feel shared instead of solitary. And then there are other days when I realize I've picked everything back up again without even noticing. Not because I don't trust God, not because I decided to do this on my own, simply because old patterns are familiar and responsibility has been my native language for a long time. On those days, I'm learning not to shame myself for tightening my grip again. Instead, I try to notice it with kindness, to name it honestly, to remember that awareness itself is already part of the healing. I don't have to get it right every time for something real to be happening underneath. Staying with this process means accepting that there will be no dramatic before and after moment. No clear line where I can say, this is the day I finally stopped carrying what wasn't mine. It's more like a daily conversation, sometimes quiet, sometimes clumsy, where I keep choosing to hand things back as I become aware that I'm holding them. What helps is remembering that God isn't waiting for me to figure out how to let go properly. He isn't grading my ability to trust. He isn't frustrated when I circle back to the same fears or the same weight. He's present in the noticing, present in the pauses, present in the moments where I admit again that something feels heavier than I want it to. And maybe that's the work of this season, not learning how to carry less, but learning how to stay honest about what we're carrying and letting that honesty become a meeting place rather than a private burden. There's something quietly holy about refusing to rush past that space. As we close today, I don't want to leave you with a task or a takeaway. I want to leave you with permission to be steady and human at the same time. Permission to be faithful without being endlessly self-reliant. Permission to acknowledge weight without needing to justify it. If you're carrying things right now that you can't fix, can't control, or can't resolve, that doesn't mean you're failing at faith. It means you're living inside real life, where love, responsibility, and uncertainty often overlap. Letting God hold what you can't doesn't require you to stop showing up or stop caring. It doesn't require you to drop commitments that matter or disengage from people that you love. Sometimes it simply means recognizing when you've been bracing internally and choosing gently and imperfectly to rest your weight somewhere other than on your own shoulders. You don't have to do that all at once. Before we close, I want to speak gently into one more layer that may be present for some of you. And if it's not, you don't need to reach for it or make it apply. You can simply let it pass. There are moments in life when you begin to sense that something is being asked of you, not urgently and not loudly, just persistently enough that you can't quite ignore it anymore. It doesn't always come with clarity. It doesn't always come with confidence. Sometimes it comes while you're still tired, still holding weight, and still unsure how everything fits together. And if you're in a season like that, I want you to hear this clearly. Leaning in doesn't require you to stop being human. It doesn't require you to suddenly feel ready. There are seasons when faith looks like staying. There are seasons when faith feels like or looks like responding. And more often than we admit, we're doing both at the same time, holding what we can't change and quietly stepping towards what's being invited. If you're noticing alignment right now, timing that feels meaningful, doors opening without force, conversations or moments meeting plans that you were made long ago, you don't need to rush to interpret it or capitalize on it. Awareness alone is enough for today. Gratitude is enough, and staying open is enough. And if responsibility comes with that awareness, not pressure, but a sense of stewardship, you're not wrong to feel that either. Caring deeply about what you've been entrusted with doesn't mean that you have to grip it tightly. Faithfulness doesn't ask you to prove the moment matters by exhausting yourself inside of it. You're allowed to honor what's unfolding without trying to control where it goes. You're allowed to take the next step without seeing the whole path. You're allowed to trust timing without demanding certainty. If this season finds you both grateful and aware of responsibility, you're not conflicted, you're attentive. And attentiveness is a holy thing. It keeps us from drifting and it keeps us from striving. It reminds us that we're participants, not architects, in the stories that we're living. So as you leave this space today, my hope is that you feel compelled to do more, but not that you feel compelled to do more, but that you feel freed to carry less. Less pressure, less bracing, less fear of missing or wasting what matters. Whatever you're holding right now, weight, invitation, uncertainty, hope, you don't have to hold it alone. You can stay present without being possessive. You can lean in without gripping the outcome. And you can trust that what's meant to grow will grow in its own time. That's enough for today. You don't have to do it permanently. You just have to notice when you're tired of carrying it alone. And if today all you can do is name that awareness, if all you can do is say, this feels heavy, even though I'm okay, that's enough. That's not the end of the work. It's the beginning of a more honest way of holding what you've been entrusted with. Thank you for sitting with me in this space today. Thank you for staying present instead of rushing past what's real. I hope you leave this episode feeling steadied, not pressured, reminded that you are not meant to be the sole container for everything you love. If you'd like to share this episode with someone who's carrying a lot, you're always welcome to do that. And if you're someone who likes to process these conversations on paper, there's a companion resource available, completely optional, there to support you if it's helpful. As always, I'm grateful that you're here. We'll continue this conversation together. Before we wrap up, I want to say thank you for staying with this conversation. I know this wasn't a loud episode. It didn't offer big shifts or dramatic clarity. It asked you to sit with something quieter, the kind of weight that doesn't announce itself, but still asks to be acknowledged. And that kind of listening takes presence. It takes honesty. It takes a willingness not to rush past what's real. If you're walking away from this episode still carrying a lot, that's okay. Nothing we talked about today was meant to make things disappear. My hope is simply that you feel a little less alone with what you're holding, a little more aware that steadiness doesn't require self-containment and faith doesn't ask you to brace endlessly on your own. If this episode resonated, you're always welcome to share it with someone who might be quietly carrying a lot too. Not because they need fixing, but because sometimes it helps just to know that someone else understands the shape of the weight. And as a reminder, this podcast moves in a rhythm. long-form conversations like this one on Mondays and shorter devotional companions on Thursdays. They're meant to walk together, but each one stands on its own so you can engage with whatever feels most supportive on a given week. If you're someone who likes to process these ideas on paper, there's an optional companion resource available for this episode. It's there to support reflection if that's helpful for you, and if it's not, that's completely okay too. More than anything, I hope that you leave today feeling steadied rather than pressured, reminded that you don't have to hold everything perfectly or alone or all at once. This work unfolds slowly, and you're allowed to meet it one honest moment at a time. Thank you for being here. I'm really glad that you are.